Hello everyone, AmyR here with Prairie Paper and Ink, doing this voiceover for I don't even know how many attempts now, just so many issues. This video was supposed to go up first thing this morning and nothing's been working for me. So, anywho, this is my cards and video for day one of the blog hops for Simon Says Stamps Celebrate You release, and I will have all that info in my blog post, which will be linked directly below the video. So I started out by creating a background, blending in a bunch of Simon Says Stamp dye inks. Now, I've mentioned this in other videos. I like using these inks when I want to create backgrounds that are not going to move. What I mean by that is their dye inks are not water reactive. So once they're down and once they're dry, if you add splatter or if you color on top of them or anything like that, the inks aren't going to move, you know, whereas when you use like distress inks and whatnot, if you go in with a wet paintbrush or add splatter, like you're going to get that reaction, which is great. But I didn't want that. I wanted the colors to stay where they are. So, and I also like with these inks, as they dry, they really smooth out. So you might see, you know, some smears here and there, or, you know, you don't have the perfect blend, but always let these completely dry because as the ink kind of soaks into the paper, it smooths out. So I did some very easy blending using several of the dye ink colors. I started with Duckling, I added Apricot, Teeny Bikini, Willow, Audrey Blue, and then here I'm adding a bit of Hot Mama at the top. I wanted to add that little bit of purple, you know, to really bring the rainbow out, plus to kind of break up because I had a lot of the pink on the top there. And I'm blending on my Imagine Crafts craft mat, but normally I would do this all either on like scrap paper, but my brain wasn't working, or my glass mat, but I had my overhead lights on and I can't use my glass mat when I'm filming with my overhead lights because the glare, like you guys wouldn't see anything. So to clean that ink off the mat, I'm just using Simon's Ultra Clean Dauber, and that cleans off most of it. The deeper colors, like the really deep purples, reds, etc., those do stain, just another FYI. But I cleaned it up. I was good to go with this. So, like I said, with these inks, they smooth out as they dry. But another thing is they'll seem dry, but they're not. Especially when you do like an entire background like this where I've applied a lot of ink. It seems dry, but I made sure I tested, and there was a couple times I didn't. Like, so much footage. I used my anti-static powder tool and I poured on embossing powder, and it was still like clinging to this background because it really was still wet. So I dried it really, really well with my heat tool to make sure the ink was completely dry. And then I used my anti-static powder tool. And I'm going to stamp one of the little candle image from the Big Birthday Greetings stamp set. So I have the background dry, anti-static powder liberally applied, and then I'm just stamping this candle all along the bottom with Simon's clear embossing ink. Just going along, I was kind of using the grid lines as a bit of a visual guide, and just kind of staggering the candles so they weren't all at the exact same level. And then I'm going to coat all of these with that same white embossing powder, and once they're all coated, I can melt them with my heat tool. So I get all this melted, and then I'm going to take a Copic marker. I've said this as well. I do not use my Copics with anything that's been heat embossed because there's something about the alcohol in the Copic markers and melted embossing powder that it can react. It can wreck the nibs of your markers, etc. Some people do it and they have no problem. I just refuse to risk it because Copics are so expensive. But with this, I was very careful. I just dabbed on just a tiny little bit. I just wanted a little bit of yellow on the flames of the candles just to give it that little extra something. So I'm not doing like anything crazy, any blending or really heavy coloring or anything like that. So I just dabbed on a little bit of the yellow. And then I added some sparkle with my Nuvo Glimmer Gloss Aqua Shimmer pen. And this is where if I had done water reactive inks like distress inks, etc., the color would be moving. You know, the color of the background would get picked up by this aqua brush and move around, which can also be a good look too. It, you know, would give the candles a lighter appearance. But that's another reason why I chose to use the Simon inks, is to keep that from happening, so I didn't have to worry about color going over the white embossing, etc. So I did that. And then, of course, once I start with a shimmer, you can't stop. You gotta add more. So I pulled out my Perfect Pearl powder and just put some directly onto my work surface. And I'm gonna like dab on some water here and mix it together so I have this really shimmery liquid solution. And I'm going to start splattering this onto my background. So again, it's not going to react with those inks. It's just going to stay this pearl shimmery splatter color. So I added that, and I still had a lot left over and I didn't want to get rid of it. So I actually took it and painted over. So I kind of made the aqua shimmer pen somewhat redundant. You don't really need to add that step, but the candle flames still have that sparkle. So whatever works. But yeah, I painted over the candles themselves with that Perfect Pearl mixture. So it gives it that pearly look and kind of makes them look more like those, you know, those little white twisted birthday candles. That's what I was kind of going for. So I did all that. I'm going to let this sit and dry for a few minutes. And while it's doing that, I am going to stamp more sentiments from the big birthday greeting set. And I'm just stamping them onto a piece of vellum. And same procedure, I use my anti-static powder tool, stamp the sentiments with clear embossing ink. I'm going to coat these with that white embossing powder. And then I'm going to melt this with my heat tool. And because it's vellum, it melts really, really quickly. You always want to move quick with vellum because you don't want to burn the vellum. So got that melted, and then I'm just going to use my paper trimmer to trim this into a strip. And it is just wide enough to fit into my little Xyron X sticker machine. So I'm going to run this through my Xyron so that applies adhesive to the entire back of this piece of vellum so that it almost makes the vellum invisible in a way once I get this applied to my background. So I'll run this through my little Xyron X sticker maker, get all that adhesive on there, press it down really, really well. And then I can just peel it off the release paper and press this onto my card front. And like you can see all the color through it. You can see the splatter through it. It's kind of a neat effect. And then if you wanted the vellum to stand out more, you could layer it. I did think about this. I was like, ooh, I could like layer 2 or 3 layers of the vellum together. But I wanted to be able to see, you know, all that color and splatter. So I just did the 1 layer. So got that into place, trimmed off the excess with my scissors. And then I'm going to start working on, I'm going to trim down the borders of this. This was A2 sized. So this was going to completely cover the front of my card base. But then I decided I wanted to trim it down a little bit so that there'd be a border around it on the card. So I'm just going to start like fiddling with it in my paper trimmer. And I'm trying not to trim off too much because I don't want to lose the blue on the bottom and then that really nice like Hot Mama purple on the top. I don't want to lose any of that really. So I'm like just very carefully taking off just little bits at a time to trim this down. Just enough so I have that nice white border with the card base, but not so much that I lose the actual rainbow effect I created with all that ink blending. So did just little slivers of trimming. And then to kind of tie it all together, I used that candle image again and all those same inks that I used to blend the background. I'm using those to ink up this candle, and I'm just pressing the base of the candle into the ink colors and then the flame of the candle onto that yellow, that duckling ink, and then stamping these onto the inside of my card in rainbow order just to give it that little extra something. And then as I was doing this, I was like, this would make another perfect little card too. Like if you wanted to do just clean and simple, yeah, you could stamp the candles in a row across the bottom of your card in a rainbow, add a sentiment, you're done. It is good to go. So quick and easy birthday cards. So stamp these, decided not to go all the way across the inside. I thought it was just nice to have just this one little row of candles. And then I'm going to ink up another sentiment from the big birthday greeting set. And I'm going to ink this up with that same duckling ink and just stamp that onto the inside of the card. So now the inside is done. I'm just going to adhere the card front to the card base itself. And the card base is standard A2 size, so 5.5 by 4.25. So card number 1 is done. I couldn't stop there. I needed to make another card because making these blended backgrounds is just life. So I had blended another background using the exact same inks. This time I just went in portrait mode and again made sure it was completely dry. I had tested this off screen. And then I'm going to stamp this great big greeting from this big birthday greetings stamp set. I inked it up with that clear embossing ink. I'd used my anti-static powder tool heavily on the background first. Inked up the stamp with the clear embossing ink, stamped it onto this background. I'm going to coat this with that same white embossing powder. And then I'm going to melt this with my heat tool. So then that really just like pops against that rainbow background. And then of course I have to add more shimmer splatter because once you start, you just can't stop. So I'm going to do the exact same thing, mix up some Perfect Pearls with water onto my craft surface, and then just splatter that onto the background with just a little paintbrush here, just to give it that little extra shimmer. And then I'm going to let this completely dry, which doesn't take very long. When it was completely dry, I die cut it with one of the new rounded corner rectangles wafer dies just to give it that little extra something. And after I die cut it, I managed, this doesn't have very, but I was like, oh, the frame that was left over, like the scrap, was perfect. Like it was perfect size. It wasn't crooked. Usually it's crooked when I do it. But it was perfect. And I was like, I didn't want to throw that out because it's perfect. So I adhered the sentiment to the outside of the card. And then I'm going to use that frame on the inside of the card just to not waste it. Plus it just kind of ties it all in together. So added some craft tacky glue to this frame and then just butted it up to the spine of the card. And again, a standard A2 size card. So 4 1/4 by 5 1/2. So once I got that frame into place, I'm just grabbing a little happy birthday sentiment from the big birthday greeting set and inking it up with that AUDREY blue ink, stamping it onto the inside of the card, and that's going to finish off the second card. So I also stamped an envelope with those candles too, and it just a white envelope with the candles in the rainbow colors, just to kind of tie everything together. Really fun. So those are my cards for today. As always, there'll be a link below the video. There'll be links to my blog post and a supply list with links to everything. Like I said, this is part of a blog hop. There's giveaway info, there's discount codes, all that kind of stuff. You can check that out in the description box below on my blog. Thank you guys so much for watching, for subscribing, for thumbs upping, for commenting on my videos. I really appreciate it. I will see you all very soon in the next one. Bye.